Welcome to Module 7 of the Tribal Data Toolbox training, and in this module we're going to demonstrate how to import a meteorological data file into the toolbox. So the first thing we need to do is we need to get our file out of the Toolbox import folder and into the Tribal Data Toolbox version 3.0 folder, and we need to rename it newimport.txt. So let's start by opening the Toolbox import folder. And the file we're looking for is the converted site s46_meteorological.txt file. And this is the file that I built in Module 5. So I right click on the file and select copy. And then I close this folder. And I go into my Tribal Data Toolbox folder and I select paste. And now I need to rename my file. So I right click on the file and I select rename. And I type in new import. And I make sure that the file name extension is .txt. And then I press enter on my keyboard. And remember that every time you import a file into the toolbox, it must be named exactly newimport.txt, and it must be saved in the Tribal Data Toolbox _version 3.0 folder on your hard drive. If it's not saved here, and it's not named exactly that, the toolbox cannot find the file and cannot import it into the database. Now I'm ready to open up the toolbox and import my file. So I double click on the Tribal Data Toolbox _version 3.0.mdb file to open up the toolbox. And I enter the database password, as I always do when I open up the toolbox. And now from the toolbox opening screen, I select continuous or meteorological data fast track. And that opens up the form, and we're still working from the number 1 button, just like we did when we imported the continuous pollutant data. We go to the data inflow button to open up that form. And this is again the same step as when you imported the continuous data. You want to click on the import raw data file from sampler button. And this form should look familiar because when we import our meteorological data, the first 2 forms in the series are the same forms that we use to import our pollutant data. So as with the continuous pollutant data files, when meteorological data are imported into the toolbox, data are moved through a pipeline of several different tables. And this is a step-by-step process that's completed by working through several of the toolbox forms in the series. So first, the data go into a temporary data import table. Then you move the data to a data verification table where additional fields are populated and you add flags to your data. And then you move the data to their permanent home, which is the archive table. And remember that this is a data import form and it's primarily driven by buttons on the form. And there is 2 different types of buttons on this form. There's the gray button, that's a multiple use button, and you can press it multiple times during an import, and that does things such as open a table, open the help files, etc. And then there's these purple buttons that are single use buttons. And during a routine data import, you usually only click on these buttons once, and then there's a radio button to the left of these buttons that once you click on it will be filled in. That indicates that you've done that step. These yellow areas of the form are simply notes. They're not buttons. If you click on them, nothing will happen. They're just notes telling you important things about the toolbox and about the form. Also remember that the buttons that have the letters with them on them have a corresponding section in the help file. And if you go into the help file, or also known as the SOP, you can go directly to that section because of this corresponding buttons in that section. Also remember that when you import a data file into the toolbox, you should complete it at once rather than completing a few steps at a time and then shutting down your computer or taking a lunch. Remember that includes steps A through M, and if you have done imports a few times and you get used to it, it usually only takes about 20 minutes to do an import. But we recommend that you have a 2-hour block of time set aside to do an import just in case something goes wrong, and that we definitely want you to finish that import. So that's why we recommend having more time than it usually takes.